Hello there, my lovelies. How are we doing? Welcome back to my channel, Beamy Reactions. For those of you who are new, my name's Beamy, and thank you for watching. Now today, guys, we have a geography video as a bit of a change from history. As you all know, I love a good history video. We have a geography related one today. So I think this is from a channel called Geography by Jeff, which I know I have seen one or two videos from, and I can't for the life of me remember the videos. I watched an awful lot of videos. So let's have a look at this, guys. Now, this one has been requested by one of my wonderful patrons. This is from Justin. Thank you, my lovely. And Justin says, "Hi, Boomy. I hope things are going well for you." They absolutely are. And do you know what? I'm not complaining. The sun is out. We're having some lovely weather. It will be about 2 more days before all of us Brits start complaining about how hot it is. It's the way. It's what we do. Below is a video about my home state, Oklahoma, and how it became a state. It's kind of a sordid history, but interesting. Well, that piqued my interest. Why is it a sordid history? On a side note, the narrator mispronounces almost every Native American word. I guess he's not from around here. Now, Justin, you know I can't comment because I mispronounce everything. So if you didn't tell me, I probably wouldn't have noticed. I'm like Megamind, honestly. Do the Will Ferrell thing of just mispronouncing like basic words. I believe it's pronounced yogging, like that. Right, okay, so the title of this video is The Map Mistake That Created a State. How did that happen? Oh, I want to hear all about the sordid history of Oklahoma now. And guys, if you're enjoying these reactions, don't forget to like and subscribe. Thank you so much, my lovelies. If you're interested, I have a Buy Me a Coffee account. That link is over here. And if you would like to help support my channel any further, I have a Patreon account. And if you want to check that out at all, that link is in the description just below there. Yes, I am very aware of how big and frizzy my hair is today. It's getting bigger as the video goes on.
Most American states took decades of slow, grueling migration to settle, pushing borders westward mile by agonizing mile. But Oklahoma, it took a single afternoon. On a spring day in 1889, tens of thousands of desperate pioneers lined up at a heavily guarded border, waiting for a signal. When the cannon fired, it triggered the most chaotic real estate grab in human history. So how did a single gunshot create an entire US state? I'm Jeff, and this is the awesome geographic story behind Oklahoma.
The land before the rush.
Located right in the south-central region of the United States, Oklahoma is completely landlocked, sharing its borders with 6 other states: Texas to the south and west, New Mexico and Colorado to the west and northwest, Kansas to the north, and Missouri and Arkansas to the east.
I love the shape of Oklahoma. It's the little panhandle. I always look at that. It's how I identify where Texas and Oklahoma is. I'm sure that's very easy for a lot of our US viewers to do that. But for us, we've got to go looking for it. So I look for the panhandle. And yeah, it's a very unusual shape. I've often thought, why is it that shape? Because quite the other, like a lot of other states around, they've got very kind of, squared off borders. But not here. Unusual shape.
And of course, the most striking feature on its map is, without a doubt, the Panhandle.
The
A narrow 166-mile-long strip of land shooting westward. That gets us into a whole lot of politics, but don't worry, we'll get to that. But to understand the politics, you have to understand the dirt. Despite its reputation, Oklahoma is not one singular landscape. In fact, it contains 10 distinct ecological regions, making it one of the most environmentally diverse states per square mile in the entire country. So
now, from what little I do know about Oklahoma, and I'm aware of this from watching Cowboy Kent Rawlins, is it gets a bit windy. It's a bit windy in parts. So that's where my knowledge on Oklahoma ends. And it is just from watching Kent Rawlins. But there we go.
let's start in the east and move west. The eastern third of Oklahoma is functionally an extension of the American South. Here, you'll find the Ozark Plateau and the Washita Mountains. This area is incredibly lush, defined by rolling, densely forested mountains, deep valleys, and winding rivers. The Washitas are actually one of the few mountain ranges in the United States that run east to west rather than north to south. It's a rugged, difficult terrain that gets up to 60 inches of rain a year, making it closer to a temperate rainforest than a dusty plain. But as
like, you know, as Brits like to complain about the rain, no surprise there. But that's a lot more rainfall than us, I think.
As you move westward into
Like
the
a
center of the
rainforest.
state, the elevation begins to rise and the rainfall begins to drop. But right in the middle, you hit a massive geographic feature that practically defined early American migration, the Cross Timbers. The Cross Timbers is a dense, gnarly band of scrub oak and hickory forest that stretches from Kansas down into Texas, cutting
Oh!
Oklahoma right in half. Early explorers described it as a cast iron forest that was nearly impossible to navigate. You couldn't take a wagon through it, and you could barely even ride a horse through it. This impenetrable wall of trees acted as a natural barrier to westward expansion for decades, which is why it was originally land that few people wanted. Pushing past the Cross Timbers, you finally hit the environment everyone associates with Oklahoma.
Before we just move on, the Cross Timbers. This is the first time I've heard of the Cross Timbers. So yeah, naturally, if it's in an impenetrable forest, that is going to be a bit of a problem for the westward expansion all those years ago. When we think of, you know, barriers to the westward expansion, we normally think about the Appalachian Mountains, but this is news to me. I had no idea.
The Great Plains. The
Okay,
trees
yes.
thin out and the sky opens up, and you enter a sea of shortgrass prairie. The
Yes,
elevation
this is what
steadily
I think
climbs
of
the further
Oklahoma.
west you go. By the time you reach the tip of the Panhandle, in a region known as the High Plains, you're standing on the doorstep of the Rocky Mountains. At the very edge sits Black Mesa, the highest point in the state at nearly 5,000 feet above sea level. So, in just
Wow.
one state, you can go from a swampy, forested lowland in the southeast at roughly 300 feet above sea level, up to a massive continental ramp all the way up to 5,000 feet in the northwest.
Things like this constantly come as a surprise to outsiders, particularly outsiders from the UK, because we're from a small little island. You know, we don't have an awful lot of variation in our landscapes. Yes, we've got Wales, mountainous Wales, and the Highlands, yes. But it's not as varied as, you know, all the different climates and geography that you'll see, gosh, within some of your states. This is just one state. America's so big.
But physical geography
Like,
isn't
really?
just about the ground, it's about the sky above it. And Oklahoma's location makes it home to some of the most violent weather on planet Earth. The state sits dead center
Tornadoes.
in what is colloquially known as Tornado Alley. The
Alley.
reason for this is entirely geographic. Because there are no major east-west mountain ranges to block airflow across the central US, Oklahoma acts as a massive atmospheric mixing bowl. Cold air spills down from the Rocky Mountains and crashes directly into the warm, incredibly moist air surging north from the Gulf of Mexico. When these two air masses collide over the flat plains, they create massive, rotating supercell thunderstorms capable of producing devastating EF5 tornadoes. The weather here is so intense and the western plains so dry that early 19th century mapmakers literally labeled the western half of the state as the Great American Desert. Tying all of this together are the state's rivers. Oklahoma is drained by two massive watersheds, the Arkansas River to the north and the Red River to the south, which forms the border with Texas. These waterways are notoriously unpredictable. In the
I don't know why the idea of a river creating the border didn't factor into my mind when I made that comment earlier about there being such squared off borders in the surrounding states, but not here. Okay, well, that makes sense. Yeah, because the border's a river.
spring,
Duh,
fueled by
Boomy.
torrential storms, they swell into raging, impassable torrents. By late summer, they can dry down to trickling streams, winding through massive beds of red sand. These rivers weren't just water sources. They were the highways that Native Americans, French trappers, and eventually American soldiers used to penetrate the interior of the continent. So, what we have is a state of extremes. Dense southern mountains, an impenetrable wall of oak trees, sweeping western plains, and skies that violently spin. It's the
Gosh.
ultimate transition zone between the American East and the American West. But a landscape this
extreme,
dynamic
isn't it?
and strategically located wasn't empty. Long before the pioneers lined to stake their claim, this region was a thriving hub of indigenous cultures. And soon, its unique geography would make it the centerpiece of forced migrations, broken treaties, and a geopolitical chess match that changed the face of a continent. We'll explore exactly how this landscape became the center of a dark geopolitical chess match in just a second. But historically, early American explorers found the dynamic landscape of Oklahoma to be anything but reliable.
The creation of Indian territory. Okay.
For thousands of years, this transition zone we call Oklahoma today wasn't an empty wilderness. It was more of a vibrant crossroads. Nomadic plains tribes like the Comanche and the Kiowa dominated the western shortgrass prairies, following massive herds of bison. In the east and central regions, semi-sedentary tribes like the Osage.
Why have I heard that tribe called the Comanche? Why why would you put the E on the end and then sometimes refer to it as Comanche? Which one's the right one, guys?
Wichita and Caddo built villages and farmed along the river valleys. And for a long time, the growing United States didn't pay much attention to this area because early white explorers deemed the land west of the Cross Timbers unsuitable for traditional farming. Instead, the federal government looked at a map of Oklahoma and saw a very dark, very convenient opportunity. The US government decided that if white settlers couldn't use this land, it was the perfect place to put the people whose land they actually did want. By the 1820s and 30s, white settlers in the American Southeast were clamoring for the rich, fertile lands held by the Cherokee, Choctaw, Chickasaw, Creek, and Seminole nations. These were often referred to by European Americans as the Five Civilized Tribes, because they had adopted many European customs, including centralized governments, written constitutions, and even large-scale agriculture. But
I hate that. Referring to the tribes as civilized because they're more similar to the European settlers. So pig-headed.
assimilation didn't save them. In 1830, President Andrew Jackson signed the Indian Removal Act. The federal government forcefully expelled these nations from their ancestral homelands in Georgia,
right,
Alabama, Florida, and Mississippi, marching them 1,000 miles west to the newly designated Indian Territory, the land that would eventually become Oklahoma. This forced migration became known as the Trail of Tears.
I have heard of the Trail of Tears. I think the nature of forcing native people out of their land is awful, but marching them on, what did they say, thousands of miles? It's awful.
Thousands died from disease, starvation, and exposure along the way. When the survivors arrived in eastern Oklahoma, they were dropped into an unfamiliar, rugged environment and told to start over. And remarkably, they did. Despite the catastrophic loss of life and homeland, these nations rebuilt. They established new capitals in the eastern forests of the territory, built schools, printed newspapers, and created thriving agricultural economies.
That's amazing, but I don't want the follow-up to this to then be like, and then it was taken away again. Please tell me that's not going to happen.
By the 1850s, Indian Territory was surprisingly prosperous, but this hard-won stability was an illusion. The national conflict was brewing back east and would spill across the Mississippi River, shattering these rebuilt nations and giving the US government the ultimate excuse to seize half of their new territory. In 1861, the American Civil War erupted. While it's largely remembered as an Eastern conflict, Indian Territory was dragged right into the crossfire. Geographically, they were wedged directly between the Union state of Kansas to the north and the Confederate state of Texas to the south. When the war broke out, the Union Army completely abandoned its forts in Indian Territory, leaving the tribes defenseless against Confederate forces.
States.
Faced with this abandonment, surrounded by the South, and with some tribal elites actually holding enslaved people themselves, several factions within the 5 tribes signed treaties of alliance with the Confederacy. This was a devastating internal fracture. The tribes fought their own bloody mini-civil war, neighbor against neighbor. By 1865, Indian Territory was decimated. Homes were burned, livestock was gone, and the populations were starving. When the Confederacy surrendered, the US government used the tribes' alliance with the South as the perfect pretext for punishment. In 1866, they forced the tribes to sign new Reconstruction treaties. The terms were brutal.
I kind of feel like the North have been almost cornering them and conditioning this into, it's like having this plan, and they're forcing the Indian Territory here in Oklahoma in, oh my gosh. Oh, it's so unfair. That's horrible.
As a penalty for their rebellion, the 5 tribes were forced to cede the entire western half of Indian Territory back to the federal government. The map of Oklahoma was suddenly sliced in two, and right in the middle of this newly redrawn map, a strange geographic loophole was created. A loophole that would soon draw the eyes of desperate settlers across the country. The US government took that newly acquired western half of Oklahoma and began using it to relocate other Native American tribes from across the Great Plains and Midwest. The Cheyenne, Arapaho, Pawnee, and dozens of others were pushed into reservations in Western Indian Territory. But when the mapmakers drew all the borders for these new reservations, they didn't quite make them fit together like a perfect puzzle. Right in the geographic center of present-day Oklahoma, a chunk of roughly 2 million acres was left over. It belonged to no specific tribe. It became known simply as the unassigned lands.
Isn't that on the dense forest land?
By the 1880s, America was changing. The frontier was closing. Good, free farming land was practically gone. Word began to spread through newspapers and railroad companies about these 2 million acres of prime, unclaimed real estate, sitting completely empty right in the middle of Indian Territory. Settlers, known as boomers, began demanding the government open it up. The pressure on the borders of Indian Territory became a boiling pot, waiting to explode. And on April 22nd, 1889, the US government finally took the lid off.
So, do you think there's more intention going on behind, creating this kind of rat race to go and claim territory in this unclaimed area in Oklahoma? That area, oh my gosh, what did they call it? That impenetrable forest that split Oklahoma. It's not there, is it? Am I thinking of? Is it slightly more further over? Because maybe the intention, if that was this area of land, is that they're just hoping people are desperate enough to try and live there. If it's otherwise impenetrable, maybe it's going to encourage people to come and claim the land there, and then they'll make the land farmable. You know what I'm getting at. Maybe not. Maybe I'm thinking of the wrong place.
Let's imagine for a minute that we're back in 1889. It's 11:50 a.m. on April 22nd. We're standing in the heat and the wind on the southern border of Kansas. We can look down the line, and stretching as far as either of us can see in either direction, there are other people, thousands of them. Some are perched in light, fast buckboards. Others are on powerful thoroughbred horses. Some are driving massive, lumber-covered wagons. And thousands more are just on foot, like us, wearing out the soles of our boots. We're all staring south into the unassigned lands, the 2 million acres of prime, empty real estate in the heart of Indian Territory. A single signal will initiate the largest, most chaotic real estate grab in human history. In 10 minutes, we run. The federal government had devised a simple rule for this land. First come, first served. To claim a 160-acre homestead for free, all you had to do was run faster than the people next to you, jam a stake into the ground, and defend it. It was a perfectly fair system. Until hundreds
and defend it being the key phrase there, I imagine. Did this get violent very quickly?
of people discovered a brilliant, illegal way to rig the race before it even began. The pressure creating this moment had been boiling for decades. The US Civil War had decimated Indian Territory and forced the indigenous tribes to cede the western half of their land. That newly empty land was slowly being surrounded by white settlement. The Homestead Act of 1862 had promised free land to anyone willing to farm it, and as good land back east ran out, the desire for this unassigned heart of Oklahoma became an obsession for land-hungry settlers, known as boomers. On March 23, 1889, President Benjamin Harrison finally gave in. He signed a proclamation declaring that the unassigned lands would be open for settlement on April 22nd at exactly noon. The mechanism was simple, almost medieval. US cavalry troops were stationed all along the perimeter to keep the settlers back until the precise second of noon. When the clock struck, a single gunshot, or perhaps a cannon blast depending on which part of the line you were on, would trigger the race. Imagine the sound. Tens of thousands of wagons, horses, and people crashing across the border at top speed. It was a cacophony of shouting, cracking whips, and thundering hooves, all enveloped in a massive cloud of red Oklahoma dust. Trains, packed with people hanging off the sides, puffed along the new Santa Fe line, moving only slightly faster than the horses, the passengers ready to leap off into the moving grass. It was absolute instantaneous chaos.
I was just about to say, I bet that was chaos. Would have made a very unusual sight, watching that scene from a distance, hopefully. Chaos.
This wasn't a migration, it was a stampede. When people found a piece of land they liked, they pounded a wooden stake into the ground bearing their name. Then, they had to wait for the official land agents to show up and process their claim. If two people staked the same spot, which happened hundreds of times, it became a furious, immediate, and sometimes violent dispute right there in the dirt. By that evening, the transformation was staggering. When the sun had risen that morning, Oklahoma City was a tiny railroad stop with 2 buildings. When the sun set, it was a bustling tent city of 10,000 people. Guthrie had grown even larger. An entire urban society had been instantly willed into existence. Yet, as thousands celebrated their good fortune and looked around, they began to realize the shocking scale of the scam. Many of the best, most valuable claims near the water and railroads were somehow already taken. This brings us to the most infamous word in Oklahoma's history, Sooner. The Sooners were the cheaters. They were the people who, knowing the value of being first, snuck past the military patrols the night before and hid in the ravines and tree lines. They waited, and then, as the legal boomers finally raced across the border, exhausting their horses and themselves, they would look up and see the Sooners standing right there, their stakes already in the ground, calmly claiming that they had won the race. This created a mini geopolitical disaster. The land offices were immediately overwhelmed with thousands of legal challenges. It took years for the courts to decide who actually owned what. The legal chaos and violence between boomers and Sooners dominated the territory for a generation. So, how did a gunshot create a state? Before that shot, Oklahoma was functionally just Indian territory, but that single day instantly proved that this region could sustain a massive population of non-indigenous settlers. It was the crucial geopolitical event. Just 1 year later, in 1890, the US government organized Oklahoma Territory, the western half, and Indian Territory, the eastern half. From that point on, full statehood was inevitable. In 1907, the two territories merged, and Oklahoma became the 46th state in the Union. This explosive history has left a profound mark on modern Oklahoma's culture and geography. We still see it in the city locations. The major city of Oklahoma City and the smaller ones of Guthrie and Edmond all sprang directly from the path of that single 1889 rush. But even more powerfully, this event shaped the state's very identity. While Oklahoma still has one of the largest Native American populations in the country, the story of its creation is the ultimate celebration of the settler myth. It's a story defined by gumption, resilience, and speed. In a fascinating act of cultural reimagining, the state didn't hide from its original cheaters. It embraced them. In 1908, the University of Oklahoma officially adopted the Sooners nickname. To this day, the crowd at a 90,000-seat stadium screams Boomer Sooner in a stadium named, ironically, after a pioneer. It's a state that literally defines itself by its original illegal land rush. But that
Boomer Sooner.
gun blast on April 22nd, 1889 didn't just mark the creation of new opportunities. It simultaneously marked the final, devastating act of theft. It was the ultimate betrayal of the treaties made with the Native American people, a single gunshot that gave birth to a state, but shattered forever the promise of Indian Territory. And so here we are, left with one of the most bizarre states in the country, home to 4.1 million Americans. It's a state that probably shouldn't exist at all, were it not for a single gunshot and a stampede. This week, I'm in Washington State, exploring how Tacoma and Seattle fought it out to become the major city of the region. It's a fun story, and you can learn all about it over on my travel channel. I hope you enjoyed learning all about Oklahoma. If you did, be sure to check out this video all about Washington State. Thanks for watching. See you next time.
Bye, Jeff. Okay, it's an interesting history, very unusual history. It's crazy to think how much the population of Oklahoma exploded. It just boomed, literally, not overnight, over noon, within a day. That's nuts. Oh, they were rotten, weren't they? Everything that they did to the Native Americans, it's wrong. It's tricks, isn't it, really? Oh, very, very unusual history. I had no idea. Okay, I get what the title means now. There's a mistake on the map and it created a state. A state, not a steak, a state. I see. Okay. That's bizarre. That would have made for quite the sight, wouldn't it? Can you imagine being a bystander? Although the red clouds of dust, they sound quite nice, but I imagine you'd be covered from head to toe in that dust, wouldn't you? I had absolutely no idea. It's baffling that a gunshot, really, isn't it? A gunshot can literally just create such a massive population. You learn something new every day. Well, thank you very much, Justin, for requesting this video. I had absolutely no idea. And I like to believe, as far as a lot of people from the UK go, we don't get taught an awful lot about US history throughout our education. So I was quite fortunate in the fact that my school did do a module on it, like a GCSE topic. So I found it absolutely just so interesting. So I'd like to think that I thought I would have been one of the few that did know slightly more about American history than most people from the UK, unless they had a specific interest in it, you know. I didn't know that. That was not taught to me in school. So very interesting. Thank you very much for requesting that one, my lovely. Guys, I hope you enjoyed watching along with me. Take care of yourselves, and I will see you next time. Bye-bye.